Okay, I'd like to make a response to TBS, his video called Wrapping Up Unbelief, in a discussion with Veritas, or ex-Veritas, Noah. And I want to call this video Unwrapping Unbelief. I thought he had some interesting titles. I call them how I see them, but things like that. So my Unwrapping Unbelief. Well, first I'd like to say I got a response, I think, from you on one of my video posts, where basically in one of my responses to one of your videos about the argument of unbelief, and in the response, you and many people, I think, that probably follow you, said that I was ad homing you and begging the question of unbelief. What I was trying to do in that last video was just demonstrate that Christianity is consistent within itself. That's what I was trying to show. Like your video was starting from Christian assumptions, trying to demonstrate how, if the Christian God exists, he should give evidence for his existence to prove to everybody that he exists. Some kind of line like that, correct? So you're starting with Christian assumptions. So that's why I was showing from Christian assumptions, with the sense of the divine, everybody knows that God exists in an ontological sense, and they intellectually escape from that. So I wasn't trying to ad hom you, and by inference, what that means is that you're denying a reality you know in the core of your being. Well, and if you interpret that as an ad hom, I'm sorry, but that's the game of being in worldviews and conflicts. If atheism or metaphysical naturalism holds, then I would be delusional in my encounters with God, and I would agree with that. If atheism holds, then I'm delusional in my encounters with God. So, are you ad homing me? Well, I guess so, but it's an inference, not a direct, personal insult, like you're trying to make it out to be. Also, so that's when you talk about begging the question. Well, you started with Christian assumptions to prove that it's not consistent. So that's why I started with Christian assumptions, to prove that it is consistent. And what I was trying to say with this atheist denial of God is paralleling it to falling in love. That's what I'm saying. So I'm not trying to attack atheists and say that they're these evil people or anything. And I think to a degree we all kind of deny the reality of who God is, some more than others to whatever extent. And then you have the other theists of stripes that we would say have wrong concepts of God, who are denying that, but on other levels. So the atheist denial of God to me is not, it's like saying that my friend, who is obviously to me in love, at the core of his being he knows it, but intellectually he's excusing it, he's trying to say, no, I'm not in love. And that's how I see a lot of atheists. And if you look at atheist response to theists, that's exactly what they do. And I almost find atheists kind of cute in that, because it's when they say they don't, you don't know what I think, and the idea of God is stupid, and there's no evidence, and there's I absolutely for sure know in my all over in my core, my being everywhere, that God does not exist. That to me is like my friend saying, I'm not in love, there's no way, no. So it's demonstrating my point, and it is kind of cute to me when atheists do that and they say that. So but I was trying to show how Christianity is consistent within itself, starting with Christian assumptions. Now I'd like to talk about human responses to things that they do not want to accept, even when an overwhelming amount of evidence is presented to them. And that's what I want to talk about. Now, I don't think this directly gets to your argument, but it is kind of a side thing that I want to talk about, because I try to, when I ventured into metaphysical naturalism, I tried to imagine what God could do to demonstrate himself to us. And I came to the conclusion that nothing really, except my heart would have to change. Right? There's nothing, I would have to change my perspective. So, say for instance, an angel flew around the earth saying, Jesus is the Lord, and believe in him. Or a Christian levitated a rock through prayer, or anything. There's always an explanation you could give. And let me give you a few arguments here, or a few things that I've noticed with people. Now I'll start with my own faith group, the Christian faith group. I think there's an overwhelming amount of evidence that the earth is old. It's 4.5 billion years old. and that the universe is 15 billion years old. I think there's an overwhelming amount of evidence for that. Okay, now there are people in my faith community that do not accept that. They think the earth is 6,000 years old and the universe is 6,000 years old. And there are people that are professional geologists that I've met that think the earth is 6,000 years old. And when you present to them evidence of why that's wrong, they have a way of interpreting it through their grid. So there's a massive amount of evidence. Also, Muslims and the far left, in response to 9/11, the massive amount of evidence that Al-Qaeda did commit that, and they did it with airplanes blowing up the Twin Towers, hijacked airplanes. Now, many Muslims, and I think the Muslim percentage was really high, 70%, thought that that was a Bush project or something that was done by Zionists, and many on the far left too, because they didn't like Bush. They interpreted it through this grid of trying to blame Bush for it. So, and these are people that have studied actually more than I have, and they say that there's no question that Bush is behind it. It was all a stage thing and everything. So they interpret it through this grid, this mountain of evidence. Also, in Muslims, there's a guy, a friend of mine, he's a Muslim, great guy, not a liar or a habitual liar, nothing like that. He was a doctor, intelligent, had a PhD, very reasonable guy. He thought, and he'd looked at all the evidence of it, and he thought that 9/11 was perpetrated by Zionists. So just because they have all the evidence in it, their evidence is not the whole game. So that's what I'm trying to show here. Also, in the atheist community, what I find is most atheists, I'd say 8 out of 10 that I talk to, even those that are intelligent like Earl Doherty and others, think that Jesus didn't exist. Now, the mountain of evidence is for that Jesus at least existed. Now, most scholars do say that there's embellishments and mythological elements to the gospel stories and the New Testament, but they all agree, the vast majority agree that he existed because of historical evidence. And Bart Ehrman, who's an agnostic, just wrote a book refuting that, showing how silly it is to say Jesus never existed. Rudolf Bultmann, who is one of the highest skeptical critics of the New Testament, said that basically the Jesus Methodist view that atheists hold is insane. So the massive amount of evidence is for the existence of Jesus, yet atheists deny it, even those that have studied the whole field and looked at all the evidence. But my real nail in the coffin of evidence here of what atheists demand to find for God, they say would demonstrate God's existence, is the solipsist. The solipsist denies the existence of the external world outside their mind. And for surely the atheist would say that if God showed some kind of physical evidence, that they would believe. But they could go to the refuge of the solipsist and just say, well, there's nothing out there. So, and there's all kinds of ways of interpreting the evidence of how God could act. Now, of course, I believe God has given overwhelming evidence for his existence, and he's given us a sense of the divine inside. So evidence is not the only thing going on here, is the point. So when atheists say, I want to see evidence, I ask them, what type of evidence are you looking for that you could not dismiss? You could just take the solipsist view, right? So evidence is not the only thing going on here, and that's why I came to the conclusion that the only way God could demonstrate himself to me was if he changed my heart. That's the whole point. That's why I'm partially, in a sense, a presuppositionalist. But my argument really against atheism and with your stripe of it, and metaphysical naturalism, and this is a de jure argument against atheism, is that it has no basis for rationality or morality. Rationality, see, for the metaphysical naturalist to get in the game of rationality, he has to affirm some sort of realism with the rational or logic. He has to affirm some sort of realism. But in affirming that realism, he undercuts metaphysical naturalism. They can't both inhabit. You can't have a realism and metaphysical naturalism. They undercut each other. So if metaphysical naturalism holds, there's no objective rationality, nothing. So you have no basis for that. Rationality is completely subjective and an illusion in atheism. Rationality is only geared for survival in atheism. This is another tack you could take on it, on atheistic Darwinianism. Our rational thought is determined, since nothing transcends the system, so everything's determined, and there's no basis for moral judgments, and this is my major refutation of your God's checklist video. If all that you said is true, or if metaphysical naturalism is true, all that you said has no basis for why God is wrong or irrational or anything. Because that's what you infer from all those questions. God did it this way, check. God did it this way, check. And you're inferring from there that it's silly and irrational that he did it that way. Well, if metaphysical naturalism holds, there is no such thing as irrationality or rationality. There's no realism in this. And in neither the logical realm, there's no realism, and there's no realism in the moral realm. Nothing. So you have nothing to stand on in metaphysical naturalism. So that's it, man. I refuted you. Also, I noticed that you got an Emmy. I'm up here in Northern California, and I know many people that went down to your neck of the woods in Southern California and tried to make it in your profession, and they didn't do so good. So in that area of your profession, I must say you're the man. You made it. You got an Emmy, which is incredibly impressive. So you're the man, and I'm not worthy. But all right, thanks for watching.